Flight has always been one of the greatest wishes of mankind. Birds look free, and when you're above the clouds, all the worries of daily life seem to just melt away. I doubt that there is anyone among us who never wished to fly like Superman or Iron Man. And with over 100,000 flights taking place every day, flight has become commonplace in today's time. But as we all know, sometimes horrible mistakes can happen. So here are 5 of the worst aviation disasters. ValueJet Airlines Flight 952. May 11, 1996. ValueJet Airlines Flight 592 was a regularly scheduled flight from Miami to Atlanta, and there were 110 people on board. Around 105 of those people were passengers, most of whom hailed from Florida and Georgia. It also included a crew of 2 pilots and 3 flight attendants. Due to some electrical issue, the plane was pushed back from Gate G2 in Miami after a delay of 1 hour and 4 minutes. After a few minutes, the passengers started to smell a bad odor. At about the same time, pilots heard a large bang sound in their headset. The plane started to lose its power because of the explosion in the cargo hold. Minutes later, a flight attendant entered the cockpit and informed the flight crew about the fire in the passenger cabin. ValueJet's flight attendant training manual stated that the cockpit door should not be opened when smoke or other harmful gases might be present in the cabin. But that rule wasn't followed in this flight. Pilots inquired with the air traffic control for a return to Miami due to increasing smoke, and inquired once more after a minute for the nearest available airport. And that was the last thing anyone would hear from the plane. It crashed at 2:13 p.m. on plane banked sharply, rolled onto its side, and nosedived into the Francis S. Taylor Wildlife Management Area in the Everglades, killing everyone on board. The National Transportation Safety Board determined that the fire that downed Flight 592 developed in a cargo compartment below the passenger cabin. They found out that just before takeoff, 144 expired chemical oxygen generators had been placed in the cargo compartment. The oxygen generators were likely triggered when the plane experienced a slight jolt while taxiing, and heat started generating, causing other canisters to activate. The intense heat ignited a fire in the other materials in the cargo hold and led to the fire that eventually led to the destruction of the plane. But just 2 years later, another plane tragedy would take place. Swissair Flight 111. Swissair Flight 111 was scheduled from John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City, United States, to Cointrin Airport in Geneva, Switzerland. The flight took off at 8:18 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time on the 2nd of September 1998, but little did everyone know that it would never reach its destination. After a few minutes, the aircraft experienced a radio blackout for approximately 13 minutes, which was later found to be caused by communication radio tuning errors. At 10:18 p.m. while flying over Yarmouth, the flight crew detected an odor in the cockpit and assumed it to be smoke from the air conditioning system, which later turned out to be true, and smoke became visible and pilots had to make a pan-pan call. A pan-pan call is a radio communication indicating an urgent situation that is not immediately life-threatening but requires assistance. The crew requested a diversion to Boston, but they were asked to go to Halifax International Airport in Enfield, Nova Scotia, as it was closer. After being advised by Halifax Air Traffic Control that they were 30 nautical miles from the airport, the crew requested more flight distance to allow the aircraft to descend safely from its altitude of 21,000 feet. The crew then requested to dump fuel to reduce their weight for landing. While following the procedure in the Swissair guidelines, the crew shut off power to the cabin, which also turned off the recirculating fans in the cabin ceiling. This proved to be a mistake as it allowed the fire to spread to the cockpit, eventually shutting off power to the aircraft's autopilot. At 10:25, the crew informed Halifax that "we now must fly manually," followed by declaring an emergency. 10 seconds later, the crew declared an emergency again, saying, "And we are declaring emergency now, Swissair 111. These were the last transmission received from Flight 111. The aircraft struck the ocean at an estimated speed of 345 miles per hour. According to the report, the accident was caused by a short circuit, probably triggered by a broken insulation of a copper cable. The electrical spark set fire to combustible insulating mats in the cockpit. There were no smoke detectors or extinguishing devices on board the plane at that time. Overall, it remains a reminder of just how harmful outdated technology can really be. But let's move a bit more into the future to another tragedy that happened early on in 2000. Alaska Airline Flight 261. It was on January 31, 2000 that Alaska Airlines Flight 261 departed from Puerto Vallarta's Licenciado Gustavo Díaz Ordaz International Airport at 1:37. The plane was scheduled to land at San Francisco International Airport. At 3:49, the flight crew contacted the airline's dispatch and maintenance control facilities in SeaTac, Washington, to discuss a jammed horizontal stabilizer and a possible diversion to LAX. The jammed stabilizer prevented the operation of the trim system, which would normally make slight adjustments to the flight control surfaces to keep the plane stable in flight. No one knew what caused it to jam. The flight crew had had a long conversation regarding whether to divert the plane to LAX or continue on as planned to San Francisco. Ultimately, the pilots chose to divert as it was a safer option. The flight crew successfully used the primary trim system to unjam the stuck horizontal stabilizer. However, it quickly moved to an extreme nose-down position, forcing the aircraft into an almost vertical nosedive. The plane dropped from about 31,500 feet to between 23,000 and 24,000 feet. As both pilots struggled together to regain control of the aircraft, they informed air traffic control of their control problems. After the flight crew stated their intention to land at LAX, air traffic control asked whether they wanted to proceed to a lower altitude in preparation for the approach. They descended to a lower altitude and started to configure the aircraft for landing at LAX. The transcript reveals the pilots' constant attempts for the duration of the dive to regain control of the aircraft. After the jack screw failed, the plane pitched -70 degrees and was rolling over to the left. The aircraft had lost too much altitude in the dive and was far beyond recovery. Flight 261 hit the Pacific Ocean at high speed between the coastal city of Port Hueneme, California, and Anacapa Island, killing all 88 people on board. The National Transportation Safety Board determined that the probable cause of this accident was a loss of airplane pitch control resulting from the in-flight failure of the horizontal stabilizer trim system. The failure was caused by excessive wear resulting from Alaska Airlines' insufficient lubrication of the jack screw assembly, and shows just how dangerous it can be to not maintain your equipment in proper working order. American Airline Flight 587. A Japanese Airlines flight was cleared for takeoff at 9 hours 11 minutes and 8 seconds AM EST on November 12, 2001. The tower controller cautioned American Airline Flight 587 about potential wake turbulence from the Japan Airlines Boeing. The airplane was cleared for takeoff and left the runway at 9 hours 14 minutes and 29 seconds, about 1 minute and 40 seconds after the Japanese Airlines flight. The aircraft quickly climbed to an altitude of 500 feet. The flight data recorder showed that the events leading to the crash began when the aircraft hit wake turbulence from the JAL flight in front of it at 9 hours 15 minutes and 36 seconds. In response to a new wave of turbulence, Molin, the pilot, alternated between moving the rudder from the right to the left and back again in quick succession from 9 hours 15 minutes and 52 seconds, causing the vertical stabilizer to fail at 9 hours 15 minutes and 58 seconds. The stabilizer separated from the aircraft and fell into Jamaica Bay, about 1 mile north of the main wreckage site. The aircraft pitched downwards after the stabilizer loss. As the pilots struggled to control the aircraft, it went into a flat spin. The resulting aerodynamic loads sheared off both engines from the aircraft. They fell several blocks north and east of the main wreckage site, causing minor damage to a gas station and major damage to one home and a boat. All on board died, and 5 more who died by the impact of the crash. The location of the accident, and the fact that it took place 2 months and 1 day after the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center in nearby Manhattan, initially spawned fears of another terrorist attack. But the National Transportation Safety Board attributed the disaster to the first officer's overuse of rudder controls in response to wake turbulence from a preceding Japan Airlines Boeing 747-400 that took off minutes before it. Overall, it was a disheartening disaster, but there's still one incident that we need to talk about: TWA Flight 800. On July 17, 1996, TWA Flight 800 departed from Elinikon International Airport in Athens, Greece, and arrived at John F. Kennedy International Airport. The aircraft was refueled and the crew was changed. The ground maintenance crew locked out the thrust reverser for engine number 3 because of technical problems with the thrust reverser sensors during the landing of the flight at JFK. During refueling of the aircraft, the volumetric shutoff control was believed to have been triggered before the tanks were full. To continue the pressure fueling, a mechanic overrode the automatic volumetric shutoff by pulling the volumetric fuse in an overflow circuit breaker. Maintenance records indicate that the aircraft had its VSO-related maintenance write-ups before the accident. The flight crew started the engines at 8:04 p.m., and soon after the flight took off. TWA 800 then received a series of heading changes and generally increasing altitude assignments as it climbed to its intended cruising altitude. The last radio transmission from the airplane occurred at 8:30 p.m., when the flight crew received and then acknowledged instructions from Boston Center to climb to 15,000 feet. David McLean, the captain of East Wind Airlines Flight 507, reported to Boston ARTCC that he just saw an explosion out here. Many witnesses saw the explosion and claimed that it was like a meteor falling from the sky. The NTSB investigated the explosion of the center wing fuel tank, resulting from ignition of the flammable fuel-air mixture in the tank. The most likely case was a short circuit outside of the CWT that allowed excessive voltage to enter it through electrical wiring associated with the fuel quantity indication system. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and New York Police Department Joint Terrorism Task Force initiated a parallel criminal investigation. 16 months later, the JTTF announced that no evidence of a criminal act had been found and closed its active investigation. And this disaster is the epitome of how important it is to keep all your equipment in proper working condition. And that is 5 more of the worst aviation disasters. If you enjoyed the video and felt like you got something informative out of it, then I hope you'll consider leaving a like and subscribing. Which disaster impacted you the most and why? Let me know down in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching.